footsteps. Crack, crack.
Some encounters don't start as fear. They start as something completely normal. A quiet family picnic that ends with something growling past the camera, and a silent campsite where unseen knocks echo through the trees while something watches from the dark. So, when these moments happen, are they just misunderstandings? Or something that was already there, waiting for the right time to reveal itself? This footage was first posted on Instagram by an account called Chilling Archives, a fitting name since the page curates disturbing long-lost clips from across the world. But the video uploaded on May 16th feels different. It doesn't just unsettle you, it lingers. At the start, everything seems normal. A family having a calm picnic in what looks like a quiet park. The father is filming his wife and young daughter, capturing what should have been a simple, joyful moment. Then something shifts. Out of nowhere, the girl stops moving. She slowly stands up, staring at something behind her father. Fear spreads across her face. As he begins to turn the camera toward whatever she's seeing, it slips from his grip. It hits the ground, still recording, now aimed up at the sky. For a few seconds, nothing changes. The silence feels heavy, unnatural, as if the person holding the camera is suddenly gone. Then, right before the clip cuts, something appears, a large, dark, fur-covered animal, growling like something wild moves past the lens. And that's where it ends. This is where things become even more unusual. The footage looks authentic, but there's a chance it was created using AI. With current technology, even highly realistic and disturbing videos can come from a simple text input. Still, one comment drew attention. A user named Interstellar Dancer claimed the footage was real, that the figure was a bear, and this was the last recorded moment of that family. According to the comment, neither the mother nor the child survived. The same user also said the video is roughly 15 years old and only recently resurfaced. Efforts to confirm the story through news coverage records, anything lead nowhere. But maybe that absence is part of what makes it so unsettling. A preschool teacher once posted a charming photo of a child playing pretend grocery store, but what the child's mother spotted in the background made her rush to pick up her son. At first, the images look completely normal. A group of toddlers playing together, one acting as the cashier, while others push small carts and pick out toy food. It's the kind of simple, wholesome moment you'd expect to see in any daycare setting. But take a closer look and it becomes clear why the photo disturbed so many viewers. Right behind the little cashier, off to the side near the shelves, there appears to be something that doesn't belong, a tall, shadowy figure standing perfectly still. It looks somewhat like a soldier in a ghillie suit, or maybe something even more unusual. It's difficult to understand what it's doing, but it seems to be adjusting items on the shelf, almost like it's shopping as well. The teacher claims there was no one else inside the room when the picture was taken. She insists that figure wasn't present at the time. The child's mother didn't wait for an explanation. As soon as she saw the image, she went straight to the nursery and took her son home. And honestly, it's not hard to see why. The more you study it, the less it makes sense. Elongated limbs, a faint green tint, tangled textures that resemble hair or moss, and a form that clearly doesn't fit in a classroom. It almost resembles some kind of woodland presence quietly moving through the shelves of a preschool. No clear explanation has ever been confirmed, and the more you try to make sense of it, the more unusual it feels. So now the question remains, what exactly is this thing? While staged horror clips are usually easy to dismiss with a sense of relief, this one feels different. Even though it's entirely made up, the eerie video said to show a skip 96 containment chamber is enough to linger in your thoughts long after it ends. The disturbing footage shared on YouTube presents what looks like a grim SCP-96 holding cell barely furnished with nothing more than a basic bed and dark red stains spread across the floor. Then, everything escalates. A warped figure is seen crouched behind the bed, pushing it aside before dropping to the ground in a chaotic burst of unsettling, uncontrolled motion. Yes, it's all computer-generated. But that almost makes it more unsettling because the idea that someone could imagine and create something this disturbing is troubling on its own. Even knowing it isn't real, it's hard not to hope that whatever this video brings to mind remains sealed behind that chamber door forever. Solo camping is often seen as a chance for calm independence and a deeper connection with nature until night falls, and something appears from the darkness that makes you want to avoid the wilderness entirely. This chilling clip, first posted on Instagram, shows the intense fear of a lone camper spending the night deep in the forest. It begins simply with the camper recording himself as he fills a bottle with water from an old well. But then, something draws his attention. Something that immediately changes his expression. Alarmed, he turns the camera toward the trees, revealing what caused his reaction: a tall, dark figure standing completely still, facing directly toward him. Its face is pale and almost white, standing out sharply against its pitch-black body, as if the darkness itself had taken shape. It doesn't look like an animal, and it doesn't seem human either. The camper's scream breaks the silence as he tries to keep the figure in view before running away as fast as he can. The way the figure remains there, motionless, silent, staring, feels like something pulled from a nightmare. One thing is clear after seeing this footage: camping alone may not feel as appealing. Because out there in the dark, there's no way to know if something like this could be watching. A mother took her daughter to McDonald's for what was meant to be a simple, cheerful outing. But what she later noticed in the photos is the kind of detail that stays with you long after. The story was posted on Reddit's Weird community by a user named creepy_facts9. According to the account, the day felt completely routine. Happy Meal's laughter, and a series of cute pictures of her daughter playing on the slide. But that night, while looking back through the images, the mother spotted something deeply disturbing. Through the clear side of the slide, there appeared to be a face, but not an ordinary one. It showed a chilling, almost unnatural grin, and it seemed to be looking in from the outside, focused on her child. The strange part is that no one else was around when the picture was taken, and she hadn't noticed anything unusual at the time. But the image suggested something else. And then it became even more unsettling. When the mother asked her daughter if she recognized it, the girl calmly answered that it was Beto, her imaginary friend. The mother has been shaken ever since. Online reactions were mixed. Some think it's just a staged image created to go viral, while others said the child's relaxed response made it even more disturbing. One commenter captured the feeling, clearly saying they would have left immediately if a younger sibling ever gave a name like that to an imaginary friend. In the middle of the night, when shadows seem to move and hidden things come alive, a security camera in La Union kept recording and captured something genuinely unsettling inside a home's garage. The clip, taken from a typical residential security system, shows an encounter that's hard to explain. At first, it looks like a human-shaped figure, but on closer inspection it clearly isn't normal. The body is extremely thin with a hunched posture that feels unnatural, and the way it moves quick and abrupt, crossing the frame with a speed that doesn't seem realistic. The camera only records a brief moment as the figure slips quietly through the garage. And even if in some unlikely case it were a person, there's still the question of why someone would be moving through a private garage at that time of night. No matter how it's interpreted, the scene feels deeply unsettling, the kind of footage that makes you check your own security cameras before going to sleep. Ever recorded something by accident that you immediately wished you hadn't seen? This clip fits that feeling perfectly. It was uploaded to Instagram and has left viewers completely confused. The footage was captured in a remote, unidentified area where a worker is seen casually cleaning up while dozens of vultures gather around him. But once you understand why they're there, that's when it becomes truly disturbing. As the clip continues, the man, who seemed to be tidying up, suddenly lifts a skeleton from the ground and begins pulling it apart. At first, it could be mistaken for animal remains. Vultures are scavengers after all. But then comes the unsettling realization it isn't an animal. It's a human skeleton. The worker calmly handles the bones and continues breaking them down as if it were just routine work, while the vultures linger nearby, almost as if they're waiting for something. Waiting for him to offer something, but the real question is what and where it came from. Everything about the scene feels off: the birds, the skeleton, the eerie surroundings. What makes it worse is that the location and the person filming are still unknown. It appears the camera operator was staying hidden, possibly recording from a distance, which only makes the entire situation feel more disturbingly real. And it leaves one thought behind: what might have happened if the worker had noticed the camera. Meet Sarah, the creator behind Salish Sasquatch, a channel focused on sharing evidence and first-hand encounters connected to Bigfoot. In her videos, she travels through the dense forests of Washington state, documenting unusual sounds, unexplained tracks, and unsettling sightings.
My heart was pounding like really bad, and I didn't know what it was going on. Footsteps, crack, 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 as it was passing trees.
A ride through Morton on mini bikes with her guide, Stephen Marcus, would soon remind her that in these woods, no one is ever truly alone.
Welcome to Salish Sasquatch, where we share evidence as well as encounters. This area is very well known in the Bigfoot community in Washington state for Sasquatch activity. I'm going to link that down below. That's a very well-known account about two people that were hired to, and they had a lot of activity transpire. So I'm going to link that below. Stephen Marcus today, and we are going to take you along for the ride and tell you about an encounter that happened in March of 2022.
Morton, Washington is widely known within the Bigfoot research community as an area with frequent Sasquatch reports. The channel had previously covered a well-known case called the Night Watchman, a documented account involving two individuals hired to guard logging equipment on a nearby hill, where a series of unexplained events took place. That video is referenced for context. In this trip, Stephen Marcus joins as guide for a ride into the same area tied to an encounter from March 2022. On March the 26th, Jonathan and around a dozen friends gathered for a night at an old quarry. Two trailers sat quietly in the dark while a fire cast shifting shadows across the clearing. The group settled in, talking and relaxing with no reason to expect anything unusual.
And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll go along with it. We'll see what's happening here. But at the same time, some of these guys were track specialists who follow footprints and the sounds and all the different things, all these different experts at their fields out here.
But one camper sitting slightly apart from the others was about to experience something the night had been holding back. Without warning, a sharp clatter echoed across the road. Jonathan and one other person noticed it right away, a sound that didn't reach the rest of the group who were shielded by the trailer. Not long after, a message came over the radio that at least 2 Sasquatches had been seen near the creek.
After the gentleman that I was sitting by, that it made me aware of the rock clacking, and then he radios over and he goes, "There's at least 2 Sasquatches down by the creek." And so I'm scurrying to go get my phone. And when I start walking down the road right here, that's when there's these 2 power knocks. It sounded like 2 gunshots, but it wasn't gunshots. It was just...
The group rushed to grab gear and phones. Then came 2 loud knocks, heavy forceful sounds carrying through the darkness like gunshots, but clearly something different. For several tense minutes, the knocking moved through the trees, steady and deliberate, as if something hidden was revealing itself on its own terms. Then came movement. One of Jonathan's companions froze as a sense of unease spread through the group.
So I'm not 100% positive where the Sasquatch was last seen. And from the version that I had heard was that when the guy was like, "Oh, I'm going to run after him and try to film him." And I was also told by some of the guys that were watching the monitor, the guy who's chasing him, he's falling all over the place. They could see that through thermal.
No one knew where to look or which direction to move. The idea that something large and unseen was out there watching, possibly getting closer, hung over everyone.
Crawling, and I could see him, I could see the fern starting to move, and he's starting to come down, and he's starting to go back this direction. As he's coming by, I see the guy who was first chasing the Bigfoot, and I told him, I said, "Hey, he's moving right up there." And he goes, "Yeah, okay, sure." I thought, okay, well, I don't know who these guys are anyway, so whatever.
Footage, later captured from above, showed a figure standing beside a tree. Only part of it was visible the left side and a portion of the back seen at a slight angle. One arm hung in an unusual position, bent and heavy. The torso appeared broad and strongly built.
I see it's going down this direction, and it's only about, as I'm coming up this way, I see Steve walking down, and it's coming across right by Steve. I know, I can't believe we saw that. And I thought, oh my God, I can't believe we both saw this thing. And we were just all excited because we didn't know what to do at that point. Then we went back into camp.
With proportions unlike anything else in the frame. It stood beside the tree like a solid, unmoving presence, tall, dense, and completely out of scale with its surroundings. For the witness, it was a first encounter confusing, impossible to ignore, and impossible to forget. Just after dawn the next morning, he was woken by a rapid series of sharp cracking sounds moving through the trees. Faint at first, they quickly multiplied and seemed to come from multiple directions at once, forming what felt like a triangle of sound closing in around the camp.
And I was so excited. This was my very first experience and introduction to collecting audio for Sasquatch. And everyone was telling me I have to use it. So I finally used it. I turned it on, went to bed around 2 o'clock in the morning. About 6:30, I think, in the morning, I got woken up and I start hearing something cracking on a tree.
An audio recorder left running in the tent captured parts of it. The sounds were faint on playback, but in the moment they were loud close, and unlike anything he had heard in years of being in the woods.
As I'm laying there in my sleeping bag, I can hear sounds going off behind me towards the direction of my feet, that way in the woods, and then over to the right. It was like a perfect triangle. You know, fortunately I caught this all on my audio. It's not great, but it's there and you can kind of hear it. Marcus is sleeping. He finally wakes up and I'm like thinking I'm the only one hearing this.
After everything that happened during those hours, the knocks, the figures seen on the thermal footage, the sounds at dawn, one question stayed with everyone who was there. How close did they come to something most people never experience at all? Something that signals its presence with knocking, allows itself to be partially seen, then disappears, before anyone can approach that pattern appears in many accounts. It raises questions about intent that don't have simple answers. What do you think it was doing out there that night, warning them, or something else? A man, hiking alone through an unnamed forest in the United States, heard something heavy moving in the branches above him. He stopped, lifted his phone, and started recording. Resting high in the canopy was a dark, primate-like form, completely still, as if it had been there long before he walked underneath it. Then gradually, it began to move.
Whoa, see what I'm seeing?
He stopped recording and stepped away quickly. When the footage was later examined, frame by frame, analysts pointed out a slight visual change happening at the exact moment the figure started to shift. That detail led to an unresolved question whether the shape had been digitally added, or if the camera simply lost focus while tracking something distant through thick branches. Do you think what he captured was real, or something else entirely? In 2009, a hiker in a Utah forest captured a photograph that still hasn't been clearly explained. The image is low-quality phone cameras at that time struggled in poor lighting, and AI image creation wasn't available. But even with the grainy detail, the figure in the frame is hard to ignore. Wide shoulders, a rounded head, and thick legs positioned at the edge of a clearing. What makes this photo stand out isn't just what it shows, but what wasn't possible when it was taken. In 2009, there was no accessible technology capable of convincingly creating something like this. No apps, no filters, no generative tools. Just a hiker, a basic camera, and something standing near the tree line that shouldn't have been there. Low-quality cameras don't mislead in the same way modern images can be altered. At that time, producing something that convincing would have been extremely difficult, and that's why this photo continues to resurface. What do you think was standing at that tree line? On May 18, 2025, a man named Edward Henry and his 12-year-old son were fishing at Plum Creek. The air was calm, the water moved gently, the kind of afternoon that feels quiet and self-contained. Then the brush along the opposite bank started shaking. Edward first thought it was a deer moving through the undergrowth. But the noise didn't fade. It became louder, closer, more intentional. Something was approaching the creek with noticeable force. Then it came out of the tree line. A large, upright figure walking on two legs with arms extending past its waist and shoulders broader than any person Edward had seen. It moved along the bank with a slow, steady stride, unhurried, unconcerned, as if the two people standing about 30 yards away, holding up a phone, were no more important than the rocks in the water. Edward filmed as much as he could. The figure never looked toward them. It never changed pace. It continued moving on its own path until the trees closed in around it, and it disappeared. Edward glanced at his son. His son looked back. They packed up their gear without speaking. The Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization later reviewed the footage and considered it credible, noting that the movement and limb proportions didn't match any known animal in the area. Some have since described it as one of the clearest sightings in recent years. Its size is one thing. The lack of reaction is harder to explain. Do you think it even noticed them at all? Over time, users have claimed to spot large, unidentified figures in various Google Earth Street View images. One photo from Washington shows a tall shape among the trees, and when the image is enhanced, some viewers believe they can make out a face and human-like features. Another image from Europe seems to show a fur-covered figure standing upright in an open field, leading to ongoing debate over whether these sightings are real or simply visual distortions. Bigfoot is typically associated with deep, remote forests far from human presence. If it tends to avoid people, would it really show up on a public mapping camera? In this episode of Small Town Monsters, the team arrives at West Morris Mountain Campground and sets up at Campsite 11. As the tent goes up and equipment is arranged,
West Morris Mountain Campground. So we're in Campsite 11. Mike Green stayed in Campsite 10. We're going to go ahead and set up this tent and establish our little base of operations.
they prepare for a night of investigation, where unusual sounds and unseen movement may be waiting just beyond the tree line. Campsite 10 carries its own history once used by Mike Green. Now, the team enters that same space ready for whatever might be nearby.
What got me into ultralight hiking and backpacking in general was I was an infantryman, so a lot of hiking on the ground, but we called it rucking back then. And it was a nice kind of transition into the normal world, but I can still kind of get a feel of the ruggedness and the discipline it takes.
The following morning, they are joined by local hiker and outdoorsman Mike Kirkpatrick, who takes on the role of guide. A former infantryman, his background shaped his ability to manage long, demanding treks. Now, he applies that experience to ultralight hiking and backpacking. For him, it's not only about endurance.
Well, when I started coming up here, there's the pop culture Bigfoot. You see him on the bumper stickers and all that. I did not think Bigfoot was real. I just enjoyed the novelty of it. Because at this point, when I started coming out here, I never saw any Bigfoot. But it was actually in 2016, I would come up here every weekend and go to a different spot and just hike around and explore.
But also about maintaining a connection to the wilderness and the discipline he once relied on. In a quiet section of the campground, an older couple quickly loaded their belongings into a pickup truck. As one team member passed by, they watched closely, appearing tense and uncertain. Soon after, the woman approached, leaving behind a feeling that something unusual had taken place. The moment lingered, as if the forest itself had held on to something no one fully understood.
I mean, I couldn't move it, and I don't think you could move it, but if you could move that rock, you would be able to.
Oh, this is a different area, huh?
World over here. This is everything.
MK,
you don't want to see that.
MK, something's traveling through here.
Oh yeah,
This path,
this
there's
is a
something
huge
traveling
path
down
right
through this
here.
path here.
As Mike moved higher into the area, he stepped off the main trail and encountered something unexpected. A tall structure formed from stacked trees stood in place, and nearby smaller saplings were broken at the same height, arranged in a pattern. It appeared intentional, like a quiet signal left behind. He realized this was more than random disturbance in the woods. That discovery pushed him further into his search. Over time, he began noticing unusual signs throughout the area.
All right, so subterranean Sasquatch.
Totally plausible.
Suddenly not so.
Totally not crazy, right?
But you know, if I'm 8 feet tall, this ain't nothing for me to climb out of.
Humid
And
down
I'm
here.
jacked.
There's people that would have no problem getting up this right now, let alone, of course, my imagination's probably playing tricks on me, but there's worn spots on the moss.
Flattened sections of moss branches breaking without a clear cause, distant sounds carrying through the forest, and objects falling with no visible source. The pattern became difficult to dismiss. Tension increases as the team senses movement along the ridgeline.
Just to watch our footing once we get out of this.
Stop.
I think the white light ticked something off. That started right after we started the white light up.
That was,
It sounded like a guy groaning.
it was man-like, but bestial at the same time. Oh my God.
A shadow passes at the edge of their sight, then appears again. Their focus shifts uphill as whatever is out there continues moving, never fully visible. Suddenly, something is thrown from the darkness and lands nearby. Lights come on immediately and no one takes their eyes off the tree line. Whatever caused it remains close hidden and bold enough to act. The silence that follows feels heavier than the impact itself.
Check this out.
Yeah, you can feel air coming out of this.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So if these are the ones we're finding.
And don't forget.
Oh, Jesus. All right.
Take your time.
From deeper within the forest, heavy sounds confirm continued movement. The team leaves with more questions than answers. Something was active on Moores Mountain that night, large, difficult to track, and never clearly seen. What moved through those shadows remains unknown. But one thing stands out: the presence was far beyond what they expected, and the forest kept its secrets.
It's getting closer.
Okay, you feel it?
Yeah.
When trees are snapped in deliberate patterns and objects are thrown from complete darkness, it often suggests something large and aware is nearby. What kind of hidden presence do you think could be behind it? A video was shared by YouTuber The Facts by howtohunt.com after he received the clip from a follower and felt it was too unusual not to post. The footage shows a tall, upright figure moving across uneven terrain. From a distance, it moves over slopes and rocky ground that would normally be difficult for a person to cross. Yet it maintains steady balance and continues with a smooth, consistent pace. Each incline and drop would typically slow someone down, but the figure moves through the landscape without hesitation. Still, the distance, motion, and environment make it hard to clearly determine what it is. So, what do you think that figure actually was? In 1924, Albert Ostman, an experienced prospector, headed alone into the wilderness of British Columbia, making his way toward the remote forests near Toba Inlet. He was dropped off by boat with supplies, tools, and a rifle, planning to spend several days searching for gold before returning. Not long after arriving, his camp was disturbed. Food was taken, but nothing was ripped apart or damaged, which didn't seem consistent with animal behavior. It gave the sense that something was observing him. One night, while he slept with his rifle nearby, he was suddenly lifted from the ground, still inside his sleeping bag, unable to see or move. He was carried for hours across rough terrain. When he was finally set down, Ostman found himself inside a steep, hidden basin. Around him were 4 large, human-like figures covered in hair, a group that appeared to be a family. There was a large male, a female, and 2 smaller ones. The only exit was a narrow passage, and it was guarded. He wasn't attacked, but he remained under constant watch as his supplies slowly ran out. At one point, Ostman offered chewing tobacco to the large male. The creature became ill, and during the confusion, he escaped. He moved across difficult terrain, climbing ridge after ridge, until he reached the coastline, where he managed to signal a passing boat. He later stated that he had been held there for 6 days. For many years, he kept the story to himself, concerned about disbelief. In 1957, as interest in Sasquatch increased, he finally shared what he believed had happened. Some dismissed it, while others pointed to the details the behavior described and the isolation of the location. Do you think this was just a story or something he truly experienced? In 2021, a Reddit user traveled to Willow Creek, an area often associated with Bigfoot reports. While hiking nearby, they captured something unusual on camera. The image showed a dark, human-shaped figure standing close to the trees. Some immediately said it was Bigfoot, while others argued it was simply light and shadow. But the person who took the photo wasn't convinced, stating the shape didn't match any tree branch or object in the area. In locations already connected to sightings, people tend to examine anything unusual more closely, but lighting and perspective can still affect what we see. Without additional evidence, it's difficult to know for sure. So, what do you think was actually captured in that photo?
That's it for tonight. Which moment creeped you out the most? Drop it in the comments. Have your own story? Share it with us, and stay tuned. The next one is even darker.